For thousands of years, the Nile River has been the lifeblood of Northeast Africa, shaping civilizations, nourishing fields, and connecting people across vast distances. Its waters have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, and its banks have been home to countless generations. Today, on November 18, 2025, that ancient lifeline faces its greatest challenge yet, a crisis that could redefine the future of the entire region. A fierce dispute over its precious waters has erupted, threatening not only the stability of nations but also the daily lives of millions who depend on the river for survival. At the center of this conflict stands the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, a beacon of hope and progress for Ethiopia, yet a source of deep anxiety and dread for Egypt, which fears for its very existence. The decisions made in the coming months will affect over 250 million people who rely on the Nile every single day for drinking, farming, and industry. For Egypt, the Nile is not just a river. It is the only major source of fresh water, the heart of its agriculture, and the foundation of its cities. For Ethiopia, harnessing the Blue Nile through the GERD is a path to development, electrification, and greater regional influence, offering hope for millions living in poverty. Sudan, caught in the middle, faces both opportunity and risk, balancing the promise of cheap electricity and improved irrigation with the threat of unpredictable water flows and political instability. This is not just a fight over a dam, but a struggle for water, development, and survival, in a world where water is becoming more precious and scarce with each passing year. The GERD is Africa's largest hydroelectric project, promising abundant power for Ethiopia, but raising existential fears downstream, where millions worry about drought and famine. Years of failed diplomacy, broken promises, and mounting mistrust have brought the region to a dangerous brink, with no easy solutions in sight. Tensions are high, with economic disruptions, military posturing, and food security concerns spreading across Northeast Africa, threatening to spill over into wider conflict. The rhetoric has shifted from negotiation to ultimatum, as leaders warn of dire consequences if their demands are not met. This crisis is not abstract. It touches the lives of farmers tending their fields, city dwellers relying on tap water, and entire economies built on the river's flow. To truly understand what's at stake, we must look beyond the headlines, into the history, the data, and the stories of the people whose futures hang in the balance. The Nile's future is now a global concern, drawing the attention of world leaders, international organizations, and millions watching from afar. The outcome of this crisis will shape the fate of a region, and perhaps set a precedent for how the world manages water conflicts in the decades to come. Egypt's bond with the Nile is ancient and unbreakable. For thousands of years, the river has been the country's lifeblood, shaping its civilization and sustaining its people through the rise and fall of empires. Over 97% of Egyptians live along its banks, relying on it for nearly all their water. The Nile is not just a river here, it is the very foundation of daily life, from drinking and cooking to farming and industry. The river irrigates fields, sustains cities, and underpins national security. Without the Nile, Egypt's fertile farmland would turn to desert, and its cities would struggle to survive. Egypt's claim to the Nile is rooted in colonial-era treaties that granted it the lion's share of the water, and veto power over upstream projects. These agreements, signed decades ago, still shape the region's politics today. Ethiopia and other upstream nations see these treaties as outdated and unjust, but for Egypt, they are the foundation of its rights. The tension between old agreements and new ambitions fuels ongoing disputes. Egypt's water scarcity is dire. Per capita water availability is already half the UN's poverty threshold, and falling. With a growing population and climate change, the pressure on the Nile is only increasing. Desalination and other alternatives can't replace the Nile's volume. These solutions are expensive, energy-intensive, and can only provide a fraction of what the river offers. The GERD to Egypt is not just a dam, it's a looming catastrophe. The fear is that upstream control could threaten Egypt's very survival, especially in times of drought. Cairo has pushed for a binding agreement to guarantee minimum water flows, especially during droughts. Egypt insists that any deal must protect its vital interests and ensure a predictable water supply. Without such a deal, Egypt feels cornered, forced to consider every option to protect its lifeline. The stakes are so high that even military options have been discussed, underscoring the river's importance. The failure of talks has deepened Egypt's sense of vulnerability. Ordinary Egyptians watch anxiously as their future hangs in the balance, aware that the outcome will shape generations. The Nile is not just water, it's Egypt's past, present, and future. It is woven into the nation's identity, culture, and dreams for tomorrow. The stakes for Egypt could not be higher. The struggle for the Nile is a struggle for the country's very existence. For Ethiopia, the Nile is a promise of progress. The Blue Nile, rising in Ethiopia, supplies most of the river's water, yet Ethiopia has long been denied its benefits. Over 60% of Ethiopians lack electricity. The GERD is their hope for change. The dam, Africa's largest, will more than double Ethiopia's power output and fuel economic growth. Ethiopians see the GERD as a symbol of self-reliance, funded largely by public contributions. Ethiopia rejects colonial-era treaties, insisting on its sovereign right to use its own water. The Cooperative Framework Agreement, signed by several upstream countries, calls for fairer water sharing. Ethiopia argues the GERD will regulate flows, reduce floods, and benefit the region. But it resists any binding deal that could limit its future development. For Ethiopia, the dam is a fight against historical injustice and a leap toward prosperity. The national narrative leaves little room for compromise. The GERD is Ethiopia's future, and its red line. Sudan stands at the crossroads of the Nile dispute, straddling both upstream and downstream. Sudan faces unique risks and rewards. The GERD could reduce devastating floods and provide cheap electricity, boosting Sudan's development. But its proximity to Sudan's own dams raises fears of catastrophic water surges if operations aren't coordinated. Disruptions could threaten water supplies for millions, especially in Khartoum. Sudan's political instability has made its position unpredictable, sometimes siding with Egypt, sometimes seeking benefits from Ethiopia. Sudan demands binding data sharing and safety guarantees. Its support is crucial for any resolution. Sudan's balancing act could tip the scales toward peace or peril. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is a feat of engineering, nearly 2 kilometers wide, towering over the Blue Nile. Its reservoir can hold more water than the river's annual flow. The dam's main goal: generate electricity for Ethiopia and its neighbors. But the process of filling the reservoir is the flashpoint. Ethiopia has filled the dam without consensus, alarming Egypt and Sudan. Egypt fears rapid filling could trigger severe shortages, especially in dry years. Ethiopia insists a swift fill is vital for economic returns. The lack of transparency and binding agreements has fueled mistrust. Every move at the dam is now viewed with suspicion downstream. The GERD's operation is reshaping not just a river, but regional relations. The Nile crisis is magnified by explosive population growth. In 1959, Egypt and Sudan had 35 million people. Today, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan together exceed 280 million. The river's flow hasn't increased, but demand has soared. Per capita water availability is plummeting, fueling competition and anxiety. Agriculture, the region's biggest water user, is under strain as countries try to feed growing populations. Ethiopia seeks to expand irrigation. Egypt and Sudan already depend on it. The GERD is seen through this demographic lens: power for Ethiopia's youth, water for Egypt's survival. The numbers are stark. There simply isn't enough water for business as usual. The region faces a collision course with scarcity. Cooperation is more urgent than ever. The Nile's future depends on adapting to these new realities. Climate change is amplifying the Nile crisis. The basin faces more extreme droughts and floods, making the river's flow unpredictable. The Blue Nile's rainfall is increasingly erratic, raising fears of multi-year droughts. Egypt's nightmare, a drought coinciding with GERD operations, devastating crops and water supplies. Egypt and Sudan want binding drought management rules. Ethiopia fears this would limit its power generation. The core dispute: who controls the buffer and who bears the risk? Climate change makes cooperation essential. Rigid competition will only worsen vulnerability. Shared data and smarter water use could help all three countries adapt. Right now, fear is winning over trust. Years of negotiations have failed to yield a binding agreement on the GERD. Egypt and Sudan demand guaranteed water flows and dispute resolution mechanisms. Ethiopia insists on its right to develop and rejects fixed release quotas. The result: growing mistrust and unilateral actions. Ethiopia has filled the dam without consensus. Egypt and Sudan call this a violation of international norms. Rhetoric has hardened, and military posturing is on the rise. The latest talks collapsed, leaving diplomacy in tatters. The international community urges dialogue, but incentives for compromise are fading. The vacuum is being filled by nationalism and brinkmanship. The fallout from failed diplomacy is now real and immediate, sending shockwaves through the region and beyond. Egypt faces water rationing and agricultural disruption. Fields that once flourished now struggle to survive, and farmers worry about their next harvest. Sudan's water plants and irrigation are affected by unpredictable flows, making daily life more uncertain for millions who depend on the Nile. Ethiopia celebrates new power and national pride, but its neighbors feel the pain of uncertainty and fear for their future. Political relations are at a low point, with shifting alliances, rising tensions, and a growing sense of mistrust between nations. The crisis has shattered hopes for regional cooperation and exposed the limits of international mediation, leaving many to wonder if peace is still possible. Egypt is investing in desalination and water conservation, but these are costly, long-term fixes that cannot solve the immediate crisis. Military readiness is quietly increasing on all sides, as each country prepares for the unknown and hopes to avoid escalation. The Nile, once a symbol of unity and shared prosperity, is now a fault line dividing nations. The GERD has changed the landscape and the balance of power, altering the river's flow and the region's future. The region is holding its breath, hoping to avoid conflict, as families and communities wait anxiously for a peaceful resolution. The immediate crisis demands de-escalation, dialogue, and a renewed commitment to peace. But the long-term challenge remains. Can these nations move from zero-sum rivalry to sharing a vital, finite resource for generations to come? The answer will shape the future of the Nile and the fate of millions who depend on its life-giving waters every single day.